Hello guys! This video is dedicated to everyone who wants to start the journey with 3ds Max. This will be the introduction to the software. So let's open the 3ds Max. I will be using 3ds Max 2023 for this video, but it looks similar for other versions of the software as well. This is what you will see after opening 3ds Max. I will briefly walk you through the software. First, we can start with the File menu. You choose New if you want to start a new file. You can also use Reset to clear all data and reset the settings. You can open the file by choosing the path, or you can use the Open Recent option if you have opened this file previously. Here, you can also find all save options. To import or export the files, you also go to the File menu. What is pretty cool here, you can adjust the workspace to your needs and preferences. Let me show you. You need to click and hold what you want, and then you can place it where you want. You can also delete this from the workspace by clicking the cross. If you want to add something, you need to right-click on the toolbar space and you see the list of options you can add. If it's already added, it will have this tick icon next to the name. If you want to delete it from the workspace, you can click on this and it will disappear. Let's say we want to have the time slider back. We can right-click and choose time slider from the list and drag and drop it to the proper place. And the same way, we can turn the other option on. Okay, now let's talk about the viewports. At the moment, we have 4 viewports. Here you can see the box in the perspective view, and we have the standard preview chosen. We can move around the viewports by clicking on them. You can see this yellow frame around when we click on the specific viewport. It means that this viewport is active. Now, if we click on this plus icon here, we can choose different options. We can, for instance, maximize the viewport. We can also hold the Alt plus W shortcut instead, which I advise using to turn on and off this option. Also, we have different views in each viewport: top, front, left, and perspective. If we click here on another side, we can choose from different shadings. For example, we can turn off edges faces. Let me add some segments so you can see the results better. I will use the F4 shortcut now to do the same thing. By clicking F3, we change shading to wireframe. We can change it here as well. Using shortcuts is way faster though. Now let me show you how you can change the views. You can click here and choose what view you want to have in a particular viewport, or you can use shortcuts that are written down next to the names. You can orbit the viewport by holding the Alt and holding the middle mouse button. By holding the middle mouse button and scrolling, you can zoom in on the viewport. The quickest way to access pan mode in 3ds Max is to hold and drag the middle mouse button. We can change the shading to clay, for example, or go back to default shading. Here, on the other hand, we can set the display quality. I typically use standard to avoid laggy screen. By clicking Z on your keyboard, you can zoom to the selected objects. Here, we have the viewport navigation controls. By using them, we can easily move around the viewport. This is a field of view option, so you can set a more wide or narrow view. If we click on the eyeglass icon, we can zoom the view. This is used to pan the view. Thanks to this, we can orbit the view. And here, we have a couple of zoom options. This is the same as the Z shortcut I've shown you before. From this level, We can also configure the viewports and set them up to your needs. In the display performance, you can determine how objects are rendered and displayed. Here, we can adjust the background preview. We can, for example, use gradients colors or solid color, so we have one color on the background displayed. We can also set up the layout. At the moment, we have 4 viewports, but we can change the layout to something different. We can also easily change it from here, so we don't have to go to the settings. We can quickly choose from different variations here. There is one more cool option you can find useful, and not everybody knows about it. We can create a floating viewport that can be helpful when we present something to the client, for example. You can extend the viewport outside the 3ds Max, for example, to see it on another screen. Okay, now let's talk about the command panel that gives us access to most of the modeling features of 3ds Max. We can start from the Create panel. It contains controls for creating objects like geometry, cameras, lights, and so on. We can choose geometry, and we can choose different types of objects from the rollout. To create the object, we need to click the mouse in the viewport, hold the mouse button, and drag it to define the first parameter of the object, in this case the radius. Then, release the mouse button, and you need to follow the procedure for different parameters. The number of parameters differs depending on the object. By the way, if you are interested in learning visualization in 3ds Max, check out our visualization training. I put the link in the corner and in the description below. Anyway, let's go back to the software. Next, we have the Modify panel where we can change the settings of a specific object. Again, these options will differ depending on the object we create. Let's create a sphere now, so you can see that it works similarly in other objects. We can also create different shapes, like lines for instance. If you hold the mouse, you can create a bezier point instead of corner. Okay, next we have lights. Depending on the render engine you will use, you will have different types of lights. Anyway, the way of creating the lights and modifying them is the same. We have the same for the cameras. We can also create helpers that basically help us position, measure, and animate the scene's renderable geometry. We can also create a chaos scatter, the tool that helps in the random distribution of the objects. So we can choose different objects to create from the geometry panel. It's good to test them by yourself so you have a great understanding of what options you have. We have also some parametric objects like doors, for example. Another cool one is the stairs, so we can quickly modify their parameters. Okay, now let me show you some basic commands. In the Edit menu, we can find commands for selecting and editing objects in the scene. One of the most common ones will be clone. We can alternatively clone objects by moving the objects with Shift. Or we can use the Ctrl+V shortcut. We have a copy and instance here that you will use a lot in your 3ds Max journey, so let me explain the difference. We can also set up a couple of cloned objects. We use copy if we want to create a completely separate clone from the original, which means that when we modify one, there will be no effect on the other. The instance method instead creates a completely interchangeable clone of the original, so by modifying an instance object, The other instances and the original are also changed in the same way. So you can easily notice that if I'm changing any parameter in one of the instances object, all of them are changing. It will be really helpful if you create lots of the same objects and you don't have to change everything one by one. Now I would like to focus a little bit more on selection options as they can drastically speed up your workflow, so it's worth knowing them from the beginning. So we have different selection options. You can also use the shortcuts that you can see next to the names, and it's really worth knowing them to speed up your workflow. We can select objects in many ways. We can change the selection type here. These options make lots of sense during the production process. You can change this by clicking Q. This option can be really helpful as well. If you choose the window selection, it will select the object only if it is entirely within the selection region. While Select Region Crossing selects objects within the window and also objects it crosses. We can also use the Select Invert option, so all objects that are not currently selected are selected, and all objects that are currently selected are deselected. You can find Select Similar useful as well. The same for Select Instances. We can click one instance and use this option instead of selecting it one by one. Basically, all these features are to speed up the workflow. What is pretty handy as well, we can select by type of object. For example, only geometry. If we want to select all geometry in the scene, we need to choose geometry and use Ctrl+A shortcut. Or we can select only the shapes. Another awesome option is creating selections. We only need to select the objects and type the name of the selection here. If we need it during the production process, we can choose it later from the list. I know there is a lot of knowledge so far, so in the end, I would like to show you just a few more important options. In 3ds Max, we also have quad menus that are super helpful. You can turn them on by right-clicking your mouse. We'll get a list of options here, like freeze selection. The selected objects will be visible in the viewport, but they can't be selected. We can easily unfreeze them at any time. Here we can also hide some objects, or unhide them. We can also unhide by typing the name of the object. Isolate selection can be pretty handy as well. To sum up, by integrating all these different options into our workflow, we can successfully work in 3ds Max. This is just an introduction, and there is way more to learn. However, this is a good starting point. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay tuned for the new videos. Also, if you are interested in creating visualizations in 3ds Max in an effective way, I'd like to invite you to check out our visualization training, where we will walk you through the process step by step. Click here to check it out on our website. Bye bye!